The Nun, directed by Corin Hardy, is a horror film that exists within the Conjuring universe. The film takes place in 1952 and follows a pastor and a nun who travel to a Romanian monastery to investigate a mysterious death of another nun. The two find a mysterious evil presence that haunts this monastery and takes the form of a nun. The two eventually realize that they need to expel this demon from the monastery so things can go back to normal. As they try to do so, things get pretty tense. Alright, so The Nun was not a movie I was particularly excited for. I enjoyed both of the Conjuring films, but I'm not in love with them or anything like a lot of people are. A lot of people really love those films. I think they're above average horror films, but nothing I ever felt the need to watch more than one time. The Nun is a spin-off film that tries to cash in on the Conjuring name by offering something similar, but yet different at the same time. The beats are fairly similar, the jump scares are there, the backbone of the story, which is an evil demon that's wreaking havoc on a group of people, is there, and it feels like it wanted to just kind of offer more of the same. The problem is that The Nun is not nearly as effective as The Conjuring is, at anything really. It's not as interesting narratively, it's much worse acted, it's paced worse, and it's not even as scary, which is kind of the most important thing. So from every direction, this movie is a big step downwards. The Nun is probably the worst movie I've seen this year. It's certainly one of the worst at the very least. And there's several problems I have with it overall, but the first being that it's just flat out boring. The first 1/3 to half of this movie, it does really try to rely on the characters to carry the story and create something interesting and maybe even something meaningful. But the performances are just so awkward and so bad that nothing works. The acting isn't good, the characters aren't good, nothing about the script itself comes across as interesting or new. This feels very much like a cash grab type of film that sought to just cash in on the popularity of the Conjuring franchise. And they didn't really put too much thought or effort into actually making something good. That's how it feels, at least. Something that stood on its own 2 feet. I've never actually walked out of a movie before because my motto is, well, you paid for it, so you might as well sit there and watch the whole thing. But this one really tested my resolve because it was so boring and also laughably bad a lot of the time. Part of my problem with it is that most of the film isn't even scary, even when it tries to be scary. So it's focused on the characters and it's stale at those points and it's slow and boring also. And then when it's focused on the scares, it's predictable and not that scary or effective either. So it's difficult to find much to like here because everything the movie tries to do, it ends up doing ineffectively. There are a few scenes that are actually pretty scary, but the rest of them are just not. It doesn't work. Jump scares have never been my favorite tactic, but they're made even worse here because they're almost always telegraphed from like a mile away. You know exactly what's going to happen before it happens, and it sucks most of the tension out of the scene. It also doesn't help that a lot of this movie feels very cheesy. There's a lot of tropes you've seen a lot before in horror movies, like people being extremely scared and doing idiotic things, the demon's powers being inconsistent and sometimes silly, and of course the fact that almost every character goes toward the danger when they're scared instead of away from it. Sometimes it's so frustrating to watch these kind of things because the danger and the threat feels forced. It feels like no one would ever do what these characters choose to do, and then it just feels silly rather than scary. Let's also talk about the pacing. It's messy, and I really feel like I'm ragging on this movie quite a bit at this point, and I don't enjoy doing that, but I'm trying to be completely transparent here. The pacing is all over the place. It's up and down with little to no flow to it at any point, really. There's scary scenes that will drag on like seemingly forever. There's that dreadfully slow first act I already mentioned. Then there's stuff in between that just feels incomplete. There's scenes that feel like they don't lead anywhere. They don't result in anything meaningful narratively, and it's just not rewarding for the viewer. So ultimately, The Nun is a very cliche, boring, run-of-the-mill horror film that isn't worth the price of admission. It has a few good scares, but it's mostly full of letdowns at almost every turn. As for the pros cons, for the pros, just a few scary scenes that actually serve their purpose. For the cons, the film is often really boring, the characters and performances are weak, the scares are often telegraphed and not that scary, and the pacing is messy. I'm going to give The Nun a 2 out of 10 and definitely recommend you give this one a hard pass. Maybe wait for it to show up on Netflix or something if you really want to watch it. So did you guys see The Nun yet? What did you think of it? And if not, let me know why not. And also let me know what you thought of the Conjuring films. Like I said, I like them, but I'm not in love with them. I think a lot of horror buffs out there like those films a little bit more than I do. Either way, this is WillFoxification signing off. See you in the next review.